At a Marine sniper range where tech failed and morale dropped, an old man in tattered boots stepped up with a forgotten rifle. They mocked him until he hit every target without missing once. What they didn't know, he wasn't just a veteran. He was the legend they were all trained to be. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? They laughed the first time he stepped onto the range, an old man in faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a red button-up shirt that looked like it hadn't been pressed since the Gulf War. His white beard unkempt, his hands veined and stiff. And the moment he placed his canvas rifle case on the bench beside the state-of-the-art sniper station, one of the young instructors snorted and said, "What is this, a yard sale?" And everyone cracked up, even the captain, because no one expected the man to speak, let alone teach anyone anything, not in a place like this, surrounded by the Corps' elite recon candidates, snipers in training, men who had survived deployments, scored top of their class, and were now lined up under a blistering sun to qualify on targets they hadn't been able to hit for 2 days straight. A wind-cut mountain range where the mirage shimmered, and the terrain fooled even the digital spotters. And the old man, known only as Mac, wasn't even on the roster. Just a last-minute call-in from the base commander, who'd whispered something about trying an old trick when all else failed. But no one took it seriously, especially not Sergeant Hawley, who ran the program like a boot camp inside a war zone, and had once told a recruit to pack his bags for breathing too loud. So when he saw Mac walk up, dragging that old green canvas bag behind him, Hawley rolled his eyes and barked, "You're not certified to be here." And Mac, without looking up, said, "Neither is the wind, but it still teaches you things." And that got a few confused chuckles before Hawley stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward the firing line and muttering, "You've got 2 minutes before I throw you off my range." But the commander, Colonel Avery, suddenly appeared behind them and said, "He's not here to be nice, he's here to fix this mess before we waste another $1 million in ammo." And that shut everyone up, because Avery didn't joke, and he certainly didn't back nobodies. So they watched in quiet disbelief as Mac knelt beside one of the sniper rifles, examined the scope like he was checking a car engine, then took out a tiny wrench and started adjusting windage while muttering things no one could quite hear. And when one of the young snipers whispered, "He's using Kentucky windage?" another muttered, "That rifle's older than my dad." And they kept sneering until he opened his own case and pulled out something that made half the instructors freeze mid-step, a Vietnam-era Winchester Model 70. Bolt action, custom woodstock, painted desert tan with chipped paint and a hand-carved tally of names and numbers along the barrel. And someone gasped, "That belongs in a museum." But Mac just laid it gently on the bench like it was alive, whispering, "You've got one more in you, girl," before lining up behind it. No spotter, no digital reader, no drone overhead, just wind in his face and distant laughter behind him as he breathed slow, counted something on his fingers, adjusted for a mirage, then fired. The crack so sharp it silenced the chuckles instantly. And then the long pause, longer than anyone expected. And suddenly the spotter let out a strangled laugh and said, "Bullseye 1,500 yards, dead center." And all the laughter died instantly, replaced by stunned silence as the old man stood up and stretched like he'd just fixed a loose nail. While the captain barked, "Must have been luck. Shoot again." And Mac raised an eyebrow but nodded, chambered another round, and said, "Luck's just practice that doesn't brag," and then hit the next target. Then the next, 2,700 yards, 1,800, 1,000. And the silence turned into awe, the mockery into reverence. until even Sergeant Hawley found himself walking up slowly, arms crossed, asking, "Where'd you learn to read Mirage like that?" And Mac replied, "Jungle heat teaches you things digital scopes can't." And finally, reluctantly, the captain said, "We've got 2 days left. What can you teach them?" And Mac didn't answer with words, just walked to the front of the group, faced the 12 men and women still in sniper school, and said, "You all think your rifle makes you a sniper. Wrong. Your breath, your bones, your regret. That's what makes a bullet sing." And the first lesson began. Not with trigger pulls, but with silence, with each recruit lying in the dirt as Mac walked between them, correcting posture, pointing out wrist tension, murmuring about wind like it was a person, not a force. And the days flew as the students began to hit what they'd once missed. Not because they changed equipment, but because they changed belief. And it was during a lunch break, sitting under the tin-roofed awning with Mac telling a story about taking a shot in Laos with a busted scope, that one of the recruits, Corporal Diaz, asked, "Sir, were you a sniper?" And Mac said, "I was a ghost," and the table fell silent. Because the word carried weight, Ghost Company being legendary but classified. And when someone asked if he was part of that Black Op unit no one admitted existed, Mac just smiled and said, "Let's focus on your breath control," and walked away, leaving behind more questions than answers, but more respect than any lecture ever could. And when the final day of qualification came, every single recruit passed, including 3 who had failed their first 2 attempts miserably. And Colonel Avery walked up after the final bell, saluted Mac and said, "You just saved this program," and offered him a job on the spot. But Mac shook his head and said, "I only came to remind you what you already forgot," then turned to leave. But just as he stepped off the range, the same captain who mocked him ran after him and said, "Wait, can I ask what you carved into your rifle?" And Mac paused, turned and said, "Not names, promises kept," and walked off into the heat haze, leaving behind 12 elite snipers, a rewritten manual of fundamentals, and a legend that would be whispered in sniper schools for generations. Because in an age of machines, it took an old man and an old rifle to remind them that true precision comes not from technology, but from memory, breath, and a quiet mind in the eye of chaos.